Break Fix Podcast is all about capturing the living history of people from all over the autosphere, from wrench turners and racers to artists, authors, designers, and everything in between. Our goal is to inspire a new generation of petrol heads that wonder, how did they get that job or become that person? The road to success is paved by all of us because everyone has a story.
Rev it up and welcome to the Break Fix Podcast. Not Cars Yeah, but we are going to be talking about Cars Yeah today.
For years, Cars Yeah has been a go-to destination for automotive enthusiasts, industry insiders, and anyone that finds inspiration in the world of cars. Hosted by the legendary Mark Greene, the show has featured in-depth conversations with some of the most fascinating people in the automotive space. But today, we're shifting gears and heading into an exciting new chapter as Cars Yeah transitions to its new host, Ginger Baker-Rust.
Ginger brings a fresh perspective, a deep love for cars, and a passion for storytelling that will keep the spirit of Cars Yeah alive while taking it to new heights. What does this transition mean for the podcast? How will the show evolve while staying true to its roots? Buckle up as we take a behind-the-scenes look at this exciting shift and hear from both Mark and Ginger about what's next for Cars Yeah.
And joining me tonight is returning co-host Don Weberg from Garage Style Magazine, one of the many personalities on the Motoring Podcast Network. And with that, let's welcome Mark and Ginger to Break Fix.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. And I wanted to remind your listeners that Eric and Don were on Cars Yeah back in October 2023 together. And then Eric was a guest August 16th. And Don was, I think he was a three-timer. He was show number 27. That's how old Don and I are. And then he was also show number 1341, I believe. Did I get that right? Maybe you were just a two-timer. I've heard that about you.
No, I think I was 3, but the third was with Eric.
That's right. Okay, we won't call you a two-timer then. But yeah, it's great to be here. And it's very special to be here with Ginger because this transition has been so unique for me and so much fun. Ginger, we did do some shows together in December and January, right?
Yes, sir, we did.
Which was fun and kind of odd for me too, because I'm always used to being on one side of the mic and not the other. But yeah, it's great to talk to you guys again. Feel like I've known you guys forever. And it's going to be a unique thing to be here on the show with Ginger because I've been editing her shows for her. And that's really weird too, because I hear Cars Yeah and I don't hear myself. What's with that?
Oh, you mean the voices in your head have stopped?
You know, like most people, I don't like to listen to myself. And for 10 and a half, 11 years, I had to listen to myself because I edited almost all my shows. There was several years there where I was having somebody else edit the shows. But I did like to edit them because I would learn things every time I edited the show. And that would help me try to improve for the next show. I did have some great editors. The ladies that were helping me were doing a great job. But then COVID came and some of the sponsors at that time went away. So the money factor was like, well, I think I should take this back. I kind of reinvented myself a little bit at that time and learned a lot more. And I just kept doing it from there on. But yeah, it is odd listening to the beginning or Rev It Up and Welcome to Cars Yeah. And it's not me, it's Ginger. it's still very hard to get used to.
See, Don, he's a pro, seasoned podcaster. He did the whole setup for us, and he's created a segue for me to introduce the first question, which is really what is on everybody's mind. Mark, you've been hosting Cars Yeah for over a decade. What inspired your decision to pass the torch? And what was your process for selecting a successor to such a legacy that was behind Cars Yeah? And how did you find Ginger after all that?
How long is this show?
As long as you need it to be.
As long as we need. In 2022, I had a longtime friend come to me and say, have you ever thought about selling your podcast? I would like to take it over. And at that time, I was getting a little bit, I wouldn't say tired of it, but when you do something for 10 years, it's like, well, maybe there's something else for me to do. I'm not so sure. And we had a long talk. And then I said, you know what, maybe this will work. So we negotiated a price. We talked about how we were going to do it. And then sadly, he got ill and he had esophageal issues, which kind of affects a podcaster, right? Being able to speak properly and so forth, or normally, I should say, not properly. So almost that entire year, I was waiting for him to get better. And he had some surgeries. He got better, then he got worse, then he got a lot worse. And then finally he said, I don't think this is going to happen. And by that time, almost 7-8 months had gone by. And you have all this momentum, and in your mind, when you're ready to let something go, I hold this all to like selling a car. We're in love with our cars, and then you decide to let it go. And all my listeners, Cars Yeah know about Orange Crush, the turbo that I had. I was all jazzed up to do this, and then it all fell apart. So then it was like, oh, okay. Now, how do you go about selling a podcast? That proved to be way more difficult than I ever thought it would be, because people think of a podcast as your voice. And so I started to pitch it out there. I got a lot of response from a lot of people. I think I talked to almost 36 different people. One of the other things I did was I did research on, have any podcasts ever sold? And I found 3. Out of those 3, 2 of them were very reluctant to talk about much of anything. One of them gave me a lot of great information. I think he was doing a horse podcast or something like that. There's a podcast for everything. And so I went, okay, well, there's a process for this. So I started in 23 trying to sell it. I had all these people contact me. I had many meetings, signed lots of NDAs, went through a lot of things. And it usually came down to a couple things. Once the person found out how much work this is, and Ginger's shaking her head, and you guys are shaking your head, they went, well, don't you just talk to people and have fun and it just happens? Actually, I had somebody say that to me. I said, what do you mean it happens? I mean,
That's a bumper sticker, Mark.
yeah, just do it, right? At that point, I started to get a little bit frustrated because I would pitch the whole thing and talk to people. I even had a couple big names. I can't say who they were because we have NDAs, but big names. If I mentioned, you'd go, whoa. But then for those companies, and even for some other people, you'd get down to the finance part of it. And usually it was the finance guy, the bean counter, said, why don't we just do one ourselves? This is easy. Okay, well, you're just going to start a podcast and have, at that time, I think I was having 85, 90,000 unique downloads a month. Really? You could do that? Good for you. Okay, go for it. None of those companies have gone on to do a podcast. I think they just realized it's not as easy as it looks. I was getting kind of frustrated, and I was starting to think, well, you know, in your mind, again, you're ready to sell the car. And then the guy that was supposed to show up at the cash doesn't show up. And then some other people come and kick the tires. And you go through that whole eBay sale thing or marketplace on Facebook or whatever it is. And you start to go, maybe this is going to happen. And your steam is starting to kind of blow out a little bit. And then one day, this lady named Ginger calls me on the phone. Now, Ginger, I had been chasing Ginger. Well, I'm married, not that way, but I'd been trying to get Ginger on the show. What was it, Ginger? All the way back to 07 or 06?
It's like 8 or 9 years. Yeah.
It was a long time. And I have a list, and Ginger owns it now, the list of all the people I've chased. And she probably looks at it every day and goes, oh my gosh, Mark. Now, remember, back then I was doing 5 shows a week. So I was pumping out a lot of shows. So, you know, the phone rings and I went, Ginger? What's she calling me for? I go, Ginger, how you doing? She goes, hi, Mark. I said, are you finally ready? Because I had contacted Ginger maybe 2-3 times a year for 7 years, like I do everybody, you know? And she goes, well, I don't know if I'm quite ready to be on your show, but I'd like to talk to you about buying it. And I went, what? It caught me off guard so much because I didn't know a lot about Ginger. I had heard about her. She'd been referred to me by another previous Cars Yeah guest, like many of the guests there did. And so we started talking. And I think our process from signing the deal from the beginning was probably 7 months.
Oh, yeah, at least
8 months. It was a long time. This was something completely out of her wheelhouse. And I was like, I think I would like to do this and it would help augment the other businesses that I do, but I don't know if I can do it. And we had lots of these intellectual talks about why I thought she could, or she would tell me why she thought she couldn't. And then I would tell her, well, here's what you have to learn and all that kind of thing. So eventually we struck a deal and we decided when that was going to start. The rest is history, really, because we did some shows together. End of January, I think, Ginger, you started doing them yourself?
Yes.
Because at this point, we're doing 1 a week. I think we did 4, 6, something like that. And I finally said, Ginger, time to
Jump
do
off
it.
the cliff.
Yeah,
The training wheels off.
Yeah, I'm getting out of the car. You're going to drive down the road now and don't crash my baby because I spent, you know, and I don't want this to fail. Not only for her personally, because I'd be able to become friends, but I built this brand in a way that I felt it could continue on forever. You know, it's like somebody, again, buying your car and then driving it off a cliff or butchering it, you know, in a way, even though it's hers now. If you want to put fender flares on it or turbocharge it or whatever. Wait, I already had a turbo. Anyway, that's the process in a nutshell. And it really was a 2.5-year process, all told, maybe even 3 years. It was a long time, but it was a bit of a challenge, but I'm very happy with how this has all worked. You can see by the smile on Ginger's face, she's done a great job. Again, like I said, when I'm editing her shows, it's just very still bizarre. It's just like, where's Mark? Now, I did do her a special intro and outro, and she's still using that. So my voice is still there for a while. I guess you really have weaned yourself away when someday I turn on Cars Yeah, and hey, what happened to me? I'm gone. That's how it all came together. And I'm very happy that it all worked out.
Ginger, before we dive into your background a little bit, let's pull on this thread for just a second. Mark's trying to get you on the show. No, no, no. And then one day the phone rings and I want your show. I don't want to be on your show. I want your show. When did that realization happen for you and how did it happen?
It wasn't all those years that I didn't want to be on a show. It was just because of what was going on in my career and personal life. And I was on the road all the time, working in NASCAR and other racing series. And I was home a day and a half a week, traveling, 10 months a year. And it just was difficult timing more than anything. But I had listened to his show for years and I had gotten to know him and the show. But I think I was coming to a transition in my career and my life. I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of things, marketing and corporate marketing and racing and in numerous other industries, pitching $100 million deals for media companies. And I've always been comfortable being the one being interviewed or pitching deals or getting on stage and singing in front of people, or giving speeches. That's never been a problem. But getting behind the mic is totally different. I mean, I can sing all day long to a huge crowd on the mic, but being able to carry a show, that was something that I was a little nervous about, especially his, because it's such a legacy. So I thought about it and I talked to a couple of people and I reached out to Mark and I was like, I had this like crazy idea. I don't even know, but let's talk about it. And, so he started telling me about it and I told him what my ideas were and why, but that I was really nervous taking over such a legacy. Also, it's beyond that. It's not just about being on the mic, it's also understanding the business side of it, of what has to be done on the business side, what kind of priorities that you have to give to it. And it's not just jumping on and recording. I mean, you have to schedule all these things that I'm actually still learning a lot of pieces of it. I had an understanding, primary foundation, but understanding all the pieces and parts totally different. I mean, I've written TV commercials, radio commercials, you name it, but I've never done a podcast. So, I wanted to make sure that I was fully prepared and wanted to make sure that I was not biting off more than I could chew because it was so important to me to carry on Mark's legacy that he built more than anything. And that internal fear of, oh my gosh, is people going to accept the fact that it would be a woman taking it over? Would they still listen? Would they be open to that? Would they care that I come from the racing side, not necessarily from the car collector side? All these different things were going through my mind. Those are all the things that I was considering in whether I could carry the show, but more than anything was making sure that I protected Mark's legacy and what he built.
Yeah, I told her, don't wreck this thing.
Yeah, I absolutely would not do that. Out of my control, but nothing within my control, for sure. Yeah, no pressure, by the way. Yeah.
Well, they say in racing, it's yours to lose as they transition the endurance driver to the next driver.
If you're not first, you're last.
That one too. That one too. Yeah. I particularly love endurance racing, and I didn't get to do much of it when I was vintage racing, but I did get to do a few. And I remember jumping into a car. I was co-driving, and the guy that got out said, okay, I've got us in first. It's yours to lose. Psyched to go. And I'm like, wait, what did you say? Oh, crap. And then you take off and you're like, I could lose this thing. And he put us out in front. The pressure's on. So exactly.
Yeah. Well, I've jumped in a couple of different seats, other people's race cars, and I was just fine. That didn't make me nervous, but this was a whole different race car that I was jumping into.
New kind of ride.
Yeah.
So, Ginger, what you're saying, though, it's not like the meat and the gravy. The gravy doesn't just come when you cook the meat.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, you have to develop. I mean, it's almost like going back to a Betty Crocker cookbook. You got to go back and you got to learn the old school and you've got to learn the business of it. And you've got to learn all the ingredients and the recipe of what makes it work and what doesn't work and how you can screw it up if you put in sugar instead of salt, right? I mean, those kinds of things. That's the way I looked at it. And the way I approach everything in business is being able to take things one piece at a time and look at it from all directions on what can be successful, what can wreck it. It's like a setup on a car too, right? You got to understand the technical part. You got to understand what makes it work in order to drive it. And it's the same thing.
Did pride myself in creating systems and procedures for this. It's the only way I could have done this for 10 years. So I had it all very tightly dialed in. And would you agree that's probably helped you a lot? Because I learned that at the beginning when I started this, and I had to do that because when I was doing 5 shows a week, you're on a treadmill that is spinning super fast and it never stops, ever. If you go on vacation, it's still going. The listeners want those 5 shows, or in the case of now 1 show, they want it. As Ginger's taking this over, I've said, okay, when's the next show? Come on. You got to get a bunch of them in the can. Come on. She's like, I know, but 3 people canceled today. And I said, yeah, welcome to my world. Yeah, it's a challenge, but she's doing a great job. I feel good every day.
It's been interesting because I'll have stuff lined up or ready to record, and then we have a power outage.
Yeah.
It's happened a couple of times.
Yep.
Or you have these people scheduled and then they have an emergency or something like that. Plus just learning the procedures. Again, taking my rookie runs down the track. I'm learning a lot of things. I've already bumped the wall a few times. I've definitely got my Darlington stripe, on this, but it's going better. I'm getting to where I'm getting things a little bit more ahead and just learning the systems. And, thank goodness I've had Mark as a guide on this, because I would have definitely had to pull into pit lane and crash and burn a couple times if I didn't have him. So
Well, you're welcome. That's 10 years of learning right there. Take it for granted.
Why go here? What is it that, you're leading into it and you're kind of getting real close to the wall and you're not touching it. You're going away from it. It's killing me to wonder, you have good stuff going on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you decide, what the hell? I'll just take on this podcast.
Gosh, I'm always been one that likes challenges that other people would not necessarily think about doing. I love a challenge and I'm an adrenaline junkie. It's kind of like anything else. When I set a world land speed record, I didn't go there to do that. I didn't even know I was going to get in a car and do that. I didn't even know I was going to race. I was going there to be with a client. And then an opportunity presented itself. The client offered for me to run his car, and I did, and I broke a record, and I hadn't raced in 30 some odd years. I've done a lot of things in my career where I've been the first one to get bloody through the wall. And so that's just kind of my MO. And also I have a really good intuition on looking at things and what things are capable of being and what they are already. Tying it in also with the business side of what I do in racing and in motorsports. For me, it was kind of a natural transition. There's a lot of things that I've been trying to work on in the racing community and the car enthusiast community, but one in particular is keeping racing alive.
Amen.
Our beloved racing is in trouble. Our car culture is in trouble. Our love with cars and our passion and our history with cars is in trouble. That honestly was the biggest driver, is ran against the wall, not walls that were supposed to be there, but that were put in front of me just because I'm a female in the sport. But kind of looked at this also as a way to be able to break some more barriers for a lot of people, including myself. But it's not the woman thing. That's not my platform. It's not the Me Too thing. It's not anything about that. It's about the love affair that I have with cars in the racing community, first and foremost. Being able to use this platform to help save it in some way. And that really was what made me pick up the phone. Was in some way, maybe I can use my voice in this direction when maybe it's not being listened to in other directions. So that was part of it.
Part of it.
That was part of it.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's more. I haven't lit up big ideas. I've been in corporate marketing for 30 years. I like I said, I've been the first one bloody through the wall many times, and it has always worked out for me. And that's just who I am. I like big challenges, and I knew that this was going to be a big challenge, and it just seemed to be a natural fit for where I was at in my career.
I'll say too that tenacity and persistence are 2 things that made cars, happen for so long. Just bulldoggedness. And that's something that when I spoke to Ginger over many months, I learned that's who she is. And I was just talking to a longtime Cars Yeah listener the other day. He actually called me and we were talking about Ginger. He actually met Ginger at an event, and he said, yeah, she's a bulldog like you. She just doesn't stop. And he also knows your mom and knows
Raleigh.
all about that. Yeah, Raleigh. Yeah. And you got to have that to do any kind of business, go through the highs and lows, of course. But that was something that many of the people that wanted to do this, I could just tell they didn't have that. You got to commit to this. As I said, it's a treadmill. You can't be successful in podcasting and let time lapse, because listeners nowadays, especially when I started this, there were only 3 car podcasters. Just three. NPR, which was the old Click and Clack show. Adam Carolla had a show, CarCast, and he's still famous and doing all sorts of stuff. And I forget what the other one was, but Cars Yeah was the next one. Now everybody has a podcast.
Yeah.
Us too. Look at that.
Well, it was interesting over time because more and more people would come to me and say, hey, I want to start a podcast. I get a lot of it now. 3 emails this morning. Hey, I want to start a podcast. Can I talk to you? And I finally started saying, I'll do some consulting. Here's my hourly fee.
Yeah.
Call me if you're interested. Because otherwise, you can't just spend 30 minutes and explain this.
No.
It's way too complicated. There's too many aspects of it. So I usually give a polite response and just say, no, I'm not interested. I'm not doing consulting right now. When I am, I'll contact you.
Yeah, Mark's right. I mean, you got to have tenacity and you got to be a bulldog. And I talked about with Mark when he first talked to me about the art of no, learning how to use that in an effective way, not taking no for an answer that just means maybe another way or another time. But also, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research. And I do a lot of research before I go into anything, generally, if I can. So I really researched it from all directions. Okay, well, how would you do this marketing wise? How would you do this guest wise? Do I know enough people? Am I far enough in the industry that I could carry this? Who could I rely on? The editing, all these different ideas, the website. I mean, there's just layers and layers and layers and layers and layers that people don't understand. And then, also understanding the business of it, of how making successful and doing the research of, okay, how do you sell a podcast? How do you buy a podcast? How do you make it have value? Gosh, there's so much that went into it. It wasn't just a couple of phone calls. We literally talked back and forth for 7-8 months. And quite frankly, I mean, there was a couple of times, Mark had to really say, okay, you can do this. Yeah, I get to the point that I was getting a little bit discouraged, and not even that. I think more so that I was having that little bit of internal doubt of fear. But fear to me is just something that you just have to walk around and say, what, get behind me because I'm going to lead. But when it finally came down to it, and I was just like anything else, I'm going to jump in and put the seatbelt on and I'm going to stomp the loud pedal and here we go.
There were a lot of great questions. And some of the people that I talked to before they were interested, they wouldn't ask me any of the pertinent, important questions. It was just all, little things like little things. How do you get so many guests? Yeah. Okay, well, there's many ways to do that. And at some point, so Ginger and my wife, I'd say, I don't know if this lady's going to ever get in the car and drive because it's just dragging on. Come on. But I could sense that with Ginger. And we became friends over the phone. We've never met in person, which is kind of silly, but she's quite a ways away, North Carolina. I'm up here in the Pacific Northwest. So many times when she would drift off a little bit and I could sense, what's worrying you today? What do you think you can't do? And she would say something. I said, okay, well, here's how you do that. Because I had answers for everything, because I've done it.
Yeah.
There's things that she has strengths that are far exceeding me because of her marketing. She just did an awesome, huge deal. She had some strengths there that I didn't have. The technical side, and she'll self-proclaim is the weakest part, but she's got 2 sons that are techie guys. And I actually had my first meeting with one of them that I thought was going to be with Ginger about how to do it. And I thought, I figured if Ginger doesn't know all this is going to be an all-day meeting. I think after an hour and a half, her son goes, okay, we're done. I'm like, well, this guy knows more about tech than I do. He's a cyber tech expert and all this stuff. So I went, okay, she's got good people on her team because again, when I started this, I had nobody. So I had to figure out everything, build a website and how to record. And, there's just all these things that go wrong and can go wrong. And every time they do, you just, okay, how do I do that? Thank goodness for Google and YouTube. I stay up all night long watching YouTubes of why are these wave tracks doing what they're doing? I don't know what is going on. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
To use a Cars Yeah analogy here, we've blown through first and second gear and we're tacking like 9,000 RPM right now. So we got to shift into the next gear and talk a little bit more about the legacy of Cars Yeah. So Mark, as you look back over your 2,500 plus episodes of Cars Yeah before the transition, there's some memorable moments that you've mentioned over the years, some of your favorite episodes and things like that. I want to highlight those for the listeners that are like, man, I got to go back and check out Cars Yeah. I don't know where you've been if you haven't listened to a Cars Yeah episode yet. And Ginger, you're still defining the next generation of Cars Yeah is going to be and what those memorable moments are. So I want both of you to kind of touch on the highs of what you've experienced so far.
I can tell you, I've been very grateful and blessed in the fact that My very first show by myself was with my really good friend, Kat DeLorean, John DeLorean's daughter. I had thought a lot who my first guest was going to be. And I really wanted to be able to give a platform to Kat to be able to tell her story and to clear up a lot of stuff about John DeLorean, especially with some of the documentaries and things that had just come out. So it was just really, really good timing. But be able to capture, I think one of the biggest things for me so far that's been really surprising is several of my guests, they've actually gotten emotional. And that's something that I wasn't quite prepared for. And Pat got emotional, and a good friend of mine, Danny Drynan, he was going through some stuff. So I told Mark, I said, that was something I wasn't prepared for when I'm recording and someone got emotional, and here these are my friends. And I'm like feeling all this emotion for them. And, and then your voice breaks and all these other things, and you get thrown off. Right. I prepare. And then it just threw me off, but in a good way. I realized that was okay because it actually made it more authentic. And I think that's been the biggest surprises so far, other than, just the stuff that we talked about, that just things that happen, they're out of your control. Right. But I think that has been one of the most special moments. And every person that I've had on there, a lot of them have been my really close friends. And it's been wonderful to be able to finally share their stories. Also, the biggest thing that I will be honest, part of the things I was worried about it, like I mentioned, was how are people going to react to a woman taking over the show? And then how are they going to react to the fact that I'm going to have more women on there? And it's been interesting. There's always the 1%ers of the little bit of pushback that it's like, oh, well, you've had 3 women in a row on the show. Well, okay. Well, one, it was March. It was Women's History Month. But 2, do you ever hear that and saying, okay, well, they've been 3 men on the show in a row? You never hear that, but you hear, oh, well, you've had 3 women on the show. So is it all going to be about women? Well, these are women in worldwide motorsports that have some incredible achievements. I think that's been the thing so far that's been a little bit of a surprise to me on one hand, but then not a surprise to me on the other. I mean, it's not anything different I haven't faced in the motorsports world or corporate world.
So Mark, you have a lot of memorable moments. Can you pick one?
No, sorry, I can't. Funny, my start was so different than Ginger's because my first show, I had set a definite date to start, 2014, May 28th. That was an anniversary for me of 1 year after leaving Griot's Garage, figuring out I was going to do this and then doing it. I said, I have to have the first show. I did my website, which I'd never done before. I'd been in the design world, graphics world like Ginger, but I'd never built a website. I didn't know how to do that. I was coming up to that date. I made the crazy decision to do 5 shows a week, and it was crazy. I mean, it was nuts. Looking back, I've said this to Ginger, I don't know how I did it. I really don't. I mean, it was just, I guess you could ask my wife. She didn't see me for 10 years because I was just in my office here doing this. But the first show was coming up, and I didn't have anybody lined up, and I knew a lot of people. I'd call people, and people say, what's a podcast? Because again, this is 11, 12 years ago, but nobody knew what a podcast was. They go, is that like a radio show? And I had some friends that I thought were going to be really great, and they just said, no, I don't want to do that. It sounds weird. I don't want to talk about myself. And I was literally, I think it was about 5 days away, and I went, I wonder if this is going to even happen. Cindy Meidel, who's in the car marketing world, she reached out to me. I'd known her from long ago. And she said, hey, this thing you're going to do. Plus, I didn't have any social media presence at all. I didn't even have a Facebook page. I just wasn't into that stuff. So I had to invent this thing. And she said, hey, you're going to do this podcast thing, right? And I go, yeah. And she said, well, who's going to be your first guest? And I said, I had no idea. She goes, Mark, it's like 5 days away. And I said, I know. I'm starting to kind of freak out. And she said, well, how about one of my clients? I said, who is it? And she goes, Rick Cole. And I said, Rick Cole, the auction guy? Now, Rick Cole was the first guy to do auctions during Car Week, when Car Week was just 3 days. But still, he was the first guy. Now there's auctions at every single event. I went, wow, Rick Cole. Yeah, I know Rick. I hadn't thought of calling him. I don't know him that well. And so my first show literally was recorded the day before I went live. He was at an airport ready to fly to Europe because otherwise I would have lost the opportunity. So I did this show. It was horrible. I was horrible. He was fine, but he was at an airport. So every few minutes it was like, flight number 73, ready for boarding. And I'm like, how am I going to edit that out? And so we did it. He's been on the show again once more later, much later on, but somehow it happened. Editing, I remember I learned the hard lesson with show number 7. You always make a copy because the whole thing disappeared on me and we had to redo the show. Thank goodness it was a friend who was very nice to me, Jonathan Ward of Icon. he said, no problem, Mark. We'll do it again. I'm like, oh, God, I thought for sure you just go. This obviously isn't something you should be doing, Mark, because you don't know what you're doing. When you come back to favorites, I'll say this. For me, the shows that are most memorable, I don't have favorites because there's things about many, 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 many guests that were very enlightening, fun. Unlike Ginger, I didn't do shows with hardly anybody I knew. Even my first 100 shows were people I didn't know, they weren't close friends. So I went in cold. Every one of these things is baptism by fire. I kind of started to like that. The grittiness of it, the scared factor of it. I don't have a problem talking to people. I never have. So, my wife always says when we go to events, you just start talking to people. She's more shy and she's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'd rather be home reading my books. And so I would say the ones that stood out for me are the people that shared, like Ginger said, emotional times in their life, but there was a consistency. They all learned a major lesson through a horrible thing, a catastrophe, something that happened in their life that was very challenging. And they learned that they needed to start helping people in order to be happy. And I've even done some keynote talks at events over the years, and it's always the same thing. It's what I learned after 1,000 conversations, what I learned after 2,000 conversations, what I learned after all these shows. And that is that we are happiest as people when we find a way to help other people. And I was really excited when that started to happen. And some of the shows were very emotional. John Nikas, who's a car guy that many people know, a writer and does a lot of things, he got me crying. I had to stop in the middle of the show because the story he was telling just had so much emphasis. And it was at a time when I just lost my dad. And it was like all this stuff just came. And he goes, Mark, are you still there? I couldn't even talk. I was like so choked up. And I go, I have to stop for a minute. And he's like, what? And I go, just a minute. And I just had to compose myself. Today, he wears that badge of pride. He goes, I made Mark Greene cry. I'm the only one. But you get emotional with people when they start telling your stories. I had a guest on the show, Barry McGuire, who I've become friends with. I've known Barry since way back my Griot's days. And his daughter, who's since passed away, but she was on the show. And she shared this story about this horrible husband she had who was abusive. And she decided one day to take her own life. And she went to go do that. And thank goodness it didn't happen. And there's a long story. You have to listen to the show. It's a great thing about podcasts. You can go back and listen to all the podcast shows if you want to hear some of me. But, that show, as she was saying it, I was like, oh, my gosh, what? I had no idea. And there was many shows like that. And out of that horrible situation where, thank goodness, she didn't take her own life and things happen and you have to listen to the show to hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says, is that she learned I need to start doing things for others. This horrible part of my life is about me. I need to help others. So she started a car show, the Castle Show at the Castle there in Los Angeles, helping young kids who were runaways on drugs, having trouble in their lives, terrible life with their families, abused. She found ways to help them. There's a repeat to this that goes on over and over and over again. And that's the secret that I've learned is find a way to help other people. So that was the key for me to learn that lesson. And there's some Tim Medvets who figured out how to take paraplegics, climbed to Mount Everest. He was about to take his own life because he was addicted to drugs after a horrible motorcycle accident. He was actually a builder of choppers. He was going to marry Cher. And I think he found out she was a little woo. So he decided not to. At any rate, that's how I answer that question. I can't just pick one. And Ginger mentions women. I think I had close to 450 women on the show before Ginger came on, and she was a guest on the show before she took over. And so having women on the show was always fun for me and different. I think the youngest guest I had was a 12-year-old racer. Ginger just did a show with a 17-year-old racer, a young woman who's coming up through the ranks. And then Ginger will have to get to her old guy or old woman show because I think the oldest guy who was ever on my show was Ed Iskandarian, right before he turned 100. And then famous people. And Ginger's already had some famous people because she knows more famous people than I do. But, as you guys know, for me, my white whale was Jay Leno. And I always said, I can't stop doing Cars Yet until I get Jay Leno. And he was very hard to get. He's just so busy, he's just...
But you did it. That was the crescendo, right? And then you kept going.
Well, and it was the Christmas morning show. And I seriously thought about just ending it at Christmas. It was the end of the year, and I thought, okay, I've done it. There's a couple others that I really... Sir Sterling Moss, I had him lined up many times, and he had to cancel because he was ill. And the last time he canceled, his wife, Lady Susie, called me and said, he just can't do this. He's not well, and he just will come across as not healthy and not sharp-minded, and that would just not be a good show for him or for you. A month later, he passed away. Same with Dan Gurney. Had him lined up many times, had to cancel. And then the last time I had him lined up, his assistant called, said he's just not doing well. And he passed away soon after that. So, those are two that I really wanted to have. They were like childhood stars of mine, that you kind of think about. There's a few others that I wish, but Ginger will get them.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I already got to meet Jay Leno a couple of years ago. He came out to a land speed event that was doing at Spaceport in New Mexico, and he came out and filmed with us out there, and that was really cool. So I got to have my Jay Leno moment on that. But there's some more people that I definitely have on my list that I would like to get on the show, and hopefully that'll be soon.
Some spoilers there, Ginger? Can you?
Let's see. I can potentially say it had to do with the big deal I just did.
Yeah, maybe you should ask her about this deal. This is a huge deal, and it might bring a very unique guest to Cars Yeah, right, Ginger?
Absolutely unique. And I've had a unique guest on already that people wouldn't expect on Boston Be a Man, who's a celebrity influencer that does satire about men being a man. But this one would be off the chain. So looking forward to it.
Can you say who that might be?
Can't yet.
Not yet? Okay. I know who it is. So
yeah.
I'm not going to give it away, but
I can talk about the deal, but I can't do that yet.
Real quick, because Eric, he didn't touch on it. Mark, I'm a little disappointed. You didn't talk about your best looking guest. And we all know
Here we go.
right here, that was me,
the Don.
the Don.
Yeah,
That's
we're
right.
not talking about the president. We're talking about Don Weberg. So
Oh God, the day he looks better than me just ended. Forget about it.
yeah, forget about it.
Forget it.
Yeah.
But no, for both of you though, what do you think makes a great automotive podcast? And how has Cars Yeah managed to keep listeners engaged for all these years? Is it the guests? Is it the camaraderie? Is it the stories? Is it just good looking people? What is it?
What's a podcast? So nobody sees you. So sorry.
Whatever.
Woo! I did played him. Yeah.
Do you want to go for this first, Ginger, or you want to?
Oh, it is absolutely the stories. For me, the best thing about the racing community or about the car community is the stories. When you sit around and you share the stories and you listen, talked about this a little bit when Mark did my interview. When I moved out to Mooresville and went to Big Daddy's restaurant, and I'm sitting there, and in walks Bobby Allison, and he's sitting down next to me at the next table with other legendary racers. But just listening to the stories and being in NASCAR and being around the racing community, I think that is the biggest thing that I've absolutely loved. Is I could sit for hours, I could sit for days just listening to the stories. And I think that is really what makes a podcast successful. And that's what I really liked about Mark's. I love the stories. I think that's the number one key.
Yeah, I would agree. The thing about podcasting is interesting is I have a format, and listeners know that. I ask the same questions again and again. And some people that I've talked to said, well, you ask the same questions over and over again. I said, but the answers are never the same. Now, they might be in some ways, like who was the person that really inspired you? Well, my parents. But why? And when I had Jay Leno on, I didn't stick to a script with him. I just let him go because the idea was a Christmas morning show. So I did devise a few questions for him, but even he drifted into the same thing. He told a wonderful story that I'd never heard, and you'd think you've heard all of his stories about his parents and his first car. And it was this crummy jalopy that had broken windows, and he drove it to school and it started raining, and he was sitting in class looking out the window, and rain was going into his new car, his new old car. And his dad and mom got in the car, drove over, and put a tarp over the car while he was sitting in class. Now, what a heartwarming story, even though it was this crummy old car with broken windows. But I thought, I'd never heard that story. And after the show, we chat a little bit, and I said, I've never heard that. And he goes, I don't think I've ever shared that with anybody before. Because I got him to reminisce, because the idea of the Christmas show was Christmas morning, what were the cars that you got? What did you wish you could get every Christmas? My birthday's right after Christmas, so I get all the leftover Christmas gifts that nobody wants. They repurpose them. And every birthday, my mom would say, what do you want? And I'd say, a Porsche. And my parents would laugh, like, you're going to get that. And one year, my mom baked a cake that looked like a Porsche. She goes, now you can have your cake and you can eat it too. You have your Porsche, you can eat it too. But those kinds of memories that people share when they get into their personal lives, and if you can make them feel at ease, and that's the key with podcasting. When the person called me for almost every one of my shows, I had never spoken to them. A lot of people say, well, could we have a phone call first? And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Number one, when you're doing 5 shows a week, you don't have the time. But number two, it takes away the spontaneity And then it's like what actors have to do. I did my own TV show for a year. I decided I'm not going to script this because I don't remember lines that well. I would rather just ask the person to tell stories. So that to me was the most exciting part, not knowing where we were going to go. And if somebody started to drift off course, I just let them go. And you never know where they went. Sometimes they went to weird places and you had to kind of pull the, get them back in the boat. Yeah, it's the stories are the fun part. You can tell with people, and I had some guests that didn't do it. They were either very corporate or very tightly wound or very nervous. That was another big problem. A lot of people were really nervous. And so I would spend time before I hit the record button talking to them, making sure, look, I'm not going to trick you. I'm not Barbara Walters. I'm not going to trick you with some question and bring up an illegitimate child you had back when you were in college or something. This is going to be about cars. We're not going to talk politics. And if you want to get into religion, that's fine with me. But this is about your passion, your love for cars, and that mantra that Ginger's picking up and carrying forward, inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Goes back to that question you asked about the why, when you asked Ginger about the why. That was really important to me in developing, and it's really fun. And sometimes I would get off shows and I go, wow, that was cool. Or I'd get off a show and go, I would like to go work with that guy or that woman, or I had no idea we were going to go down that path. This is very interesting. Yeah, it's like a blind date a little bit, I guess. Been so long. So, been married 40 years, so I can't tell you what those were like. But you don't know what's going to happen. And there's some excitement to that. If you're the kind of person that likes that, and I am, it makes it a lot more fun. As long as you can get that ease. And Ginger's got that Southern style to her. I've teased her a little bit about, she says she has this accent. And every once in a while I hear a word come out here and there that she's fought that off. But that Southern comfort, Southern style friendship comes through, which is helpful for the guest, which is the most important thing. Put the guest at ease. Because we've all watched interviews, especially with celebrities.
Yeah.
And I will say celebrities are the most challenging. In fact, I even had I'm not going to mention his name, but I had a big time celebrity planned. And his agent called the day of the show and said, he's not interested in doing the show. Your questions are too different for him. Like, what do you mean? Well, he's used to answering the same questions from everybody. Well, wouldn't that be more interesting? He's not interested in that. It's too scary for him because he's got a script in his mind. And this is a big name person. So that was a really disappointing day. I was all fired up to get him. But I think for the most part, and I think people have found this with Ginger in editing her shows and listening to her, she has a way to put people at ease and make them feel comfortable.
Mark said it best. I can say this about the first show that I did with Cat DeLorean. There was some truth bombs that she released on there that I had no idea was coming, that she literally had just learned about her mother and father.
Oh, yeah, that one on, because you did a 2-part show.
Yes.
I still talk to people about that. Do you know, John DeLorean, that you got to listen to that show?
Yeah, you do. Mark and I both, we were blown away. And it was really interesting. I mean, all this stuff that's out there about John DeLorean and documentaries and the books and all this, that, and the other. And then she had just learned this part of history about him and her mother that she had no idea. And I mean, it was a huge truth bomb and it was great. I mean, It was great.
Look at Don Smile. He's a big DeLorean guy. So
I don't know what you're talking of. I don't.
Yeah, right.
No clue. Not one in my garage. No.
There you go, Eric. There's that character.
It always comes out.
Ginger, you talk of accent. People tell me all time, you have accent. I don't know what they're saying.
Let me talk about that because actually story behind that. I actually really do have a very thick Southern accent when I'm around my people, so to speak. When I was, but when I started out in corporate advertising, I was in my early 20s. And I'm going in front of boardrooms full of, middle-aged men as a 22-year-old blonde, 5 foot nothing, pitching deals. My boss, he said, this is nothing against you. He said, but your accent makes it difficult to take you serious because you're just a Southern Belle, right? So he said, you need to talk more like a Yankee. Okay, well, I'm trained in singing growing up, so I understood what he meant. I worked on to where I lowered my voice. I talk slower. I got rid of most of the accent. Now, there's some words that will come out that I just can't help because it's just difficult to say. I had to actually learn that to do it this way. And now it's just muscle memory to be able to get taken seriously in business. But like I said, when I'm around people I'm comfortable with, or it's my people, or I'm around my Southern folk, so to speak, then the Southern accent's right there. It's still there. But it's so muscle memory now after 30 some odd years of having to speak more that I could be taken seriously in business.
Every once in a while when we were talking, she'd say something. I go, what?
Yeah.
What'd you say? And okay.
Start the show. How y'all doing?
Yeah. Well, it's like the word heal. Okay. It's for me, it's heal. Okay. HILL or HEEL. It's
Heal. Oh.
heal. Okay.
Yeah.
It's heal, or Mooresville or Statesville or Louisville. It's not Mooresville. It's yeah.
Rave it up and welcome to
Yeah.
Cars.
Rev it up and welcome to Cars. It sneaks out every once in a while. Like I said, in any business situation, it's generally just that muscle memory comes in from having to do it so long differently.
Accent aside, you've got a kind of a big role ahead of you. You're stepping into a new old show. What excites you about the opportunity most? You've kind of touched on a few things, but what most excites you about this? And how do you plan to really make the show your own?
First of all, I'm going to be updating the website, revamping and 2.0, because you have to evolve. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of things with that as well, and to where there's going to be storytelling section and and highlighting a couple of different things. I can't tell everything yet, but I've been working on potentially some co-hosts at some point, and I have a lot of ideas that are on the table that, again, I don't want to be premature on announcing because I'm still working through the logistics of it. And again, I spent a lot of time researching and thinking about what I want to do with this show. The biggest thing is I want to make sure to keep the listeners that Mark built. I want to make sure to maintain that culture as the foundation, and the car enthusiast and the car collector, and I mean all the things that Mark built. What I think I bring to the table that's going to extend it is the broad aspect of motorsports from every genre, right? Whether it's NHRA or NASCAR or it's off-road or dirt racing. There's so many different aspects of motorsports. People understand. I think most people that are outside of motorsports and in the car community don't understand, and globally, how actually a tight-knit community it really, really is. And so my biggest goal is to bring people that are not in that community and never, especially youth that have never been educated or introduced to the car world, to introduce them to that, and to bring new people in that maybe know who I am or I'm familiar with, or don't know who I am, but maybe I have a different voice than Mark does that will bring it to them in a little bit of a different storytelling aspect, or from a different aspect that will actually make them interested. Like I stated the first of the show, it's important for all of us. This is our love. This was our passion. We have to figure out a way to keep it alive and to keep the history alive and to keep motorsports alive, no matter what the technology is. Those are the things that I think are that I'm focused more so on building on further.
You want to bring in more youth, is that what you said?
Yes. For instance, the young lady that her show will be airing, there's a lot out there that don't have a platform or a voice, and they don't get interviewed because they're young and up and coming. And I want to be able to give a voice to some of those up and coming youth that are actually taking interest in the car world, or actually trying to make it up in racing, or actually trying to climb the ladder. And, she's not experienced at speaking, and it's a short show, but I wanted to give her an experience that she needed just to be able to not only survive, but to actually try to be able to take the next step in motorsports in her career. And most of the youth don't get that. Actually, most of the adults or even professionals are running every week don't even get that opportunity. But my big thing is being able to bring youth and a more diverse playbook as far as a larger community at hand.
How are you outreaching to the youth of America or the young people of America? What is your game plan, or if you can even go into that?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no.
But what is the game plan? How are we going to engage with more youth?
I mean, here's the thing. I come from a very tiny, small farm town in southwest Missouri from the Ozarks. Where I grew up at the time, women and children would be seen and not heard. Okay. I mean, girls weren't allowed. Women weren't allowed even in the track, the pit area, let alone you didn't race a car. I mean, that was just unheard of. And so, I mean, I was the only girl in town. I was sneaking the car out of the garage at 12 years old in the middle of the night, going and racing with the guys. But I never saw myself ever being able to be in the race community or even be around it, because it was not made available to me. And it was shown to me that this is not for girls or women. This is not for you. This is not feasible. This is, nothing. I had no way, no intention of even knowing that I could do this later on in life. And it did take place later on in life. And so I take that, and every youth, I try to take as many as I can to a race. I talk to them about racing. I tell them what I do, especially girls. But I want them to understand that it's not about just getting into a car and being able to race a car. It's about being an engineer. It's about mechanics. It's about mathematics. It's about all these other things that people don't understand that are involved in racing, even the marketing side or the business side. I just start talking to them. I bring them to races or I take them to car shows. I've worked with a lot of youth in my career and in my personal life. I've had the opportunity to help care for a lot of kids, especially troubled kids. And one of the things that I introduced them to was racing and showing them that this seems beyond your reach, but it's not. Actually giving them introduction to something that they were not familiar with. And you would be amazed how much the experience gave them on being able to just look and see that there's a whole different world out there that they had never even thought of. But also being able to talk about the history. We have to talk about the history. I do it all the time. Anybody I meet.
Where are you meeting these people? How are you getting yourself in front of the youth of America?
Okay, well, so I'll give you an example. One of my sons, he was a all-star competitive cheerleader. Now, most people will not understand what that is, but it's not like what you see in high school. He made the equivalent of a junior Olympic team. He made a world's team. He competed against 800 other teams from around the world. And we traveled 8 months out of the year to these competitions. And I would talk to these kids about racing or tell them about a race that I went to, or I invited them. I have been a foster mom to kids that were hurt in war-torn areas of Afghanistan. And I brought kids from Afghanistan over and took care of them and gave them medical care. And guess what I did? I took them to a race. And exposed them to things that they had never seen before and never even heard of, let alone they come over and they see the grass on the ground or swimming pool or things that they had never, did in their life, but to take them to a race. And they went back to Afghanistan with these stories and these pictures about things that they could tell other people. I've traveled in Europe and I've talked to kids there or kids that were friends of my sons. When they would come over, I'd take them to a race. That's how you do it. I mean, it sounds very simplistic, but that's how you do it.
Sounds like it's just major networking.
Yes.
Working within the community or the community you're exposed to and kind of making it your own.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what's interesting is you can sit and you can watch these kids listen to, their dad talk about it. But it's interesting when they hear a woman because they look at you and like, really? I'll just give you an example. I interviewed a young gentleman today for a job and was talking to him. And, I told him a little bit about me. And I said, I've been in racing. He was like, really? Racing? Wow, I would have never thought about that for you. I've never expected that. I get that over and over and over again, especially when I talk to young males. They're like, really? Wow, I didn't know women could do that. No, I'm serious. I mean, that's a reaction. It's just like, oh, you don't look like the type of person that would do these things. And that has actually been the greatest part about it is, and that's what I've learned. Talk to more males, talk to more youth, youth and females, but the same thing. I've got little girls. I own another business that come into the business. And these little 3 or 4 or 5-year-old girls, and I'll be talking to them or their mom or whatever, and I'll always mention racing in some way or a car or whatever. They just look at you like, really? Even that young, really? There's not one time so far that I've run into it hasn't been a, wow, that's interesting. And that's the way you have to do it. You got to talk to these kids like it's something that they should know, but they don't, other than what they've seen on the Cars movie. Don, did I answer your question to your satisfaction?
You did. Oh, believe me, I could keep going. I think you and I could go back and forth.
Probably.
Banter. That's what they call it back east. They call it banter, banter.
Banter.
Well, switching into Top Gear as we round out the last segment of the show here, we turn back to Mark. We really want to talk about podcasting again at its core because that's what we started off talking about. And so stepping away from the hosting chair, stepping away from the microphone, you're still in the editing room. You're making sure things do hit the cutting room floor in some cases. Because I've heard you speak to other podcasters before. You've been a mentor to me as well. You've helped a lot of people along the way. But what advice did you give to Ginger as she took on this new role?
I would say maybe one of the first things was be yourself. Don't try to copy me. Don't try to copy somebody else. Don't try to be somebody else. I was given that advice when I started this by a very, very successful podcaster, John Lee Dumas, who does Entrepreneurs on Fire. I mean, super successful guy. And I was able to actually get him on the phone for a little bit. That was one of the things he said. Just be yourself. Be enthusiastic about what you do. She's enthusiastic about cars. So that was pretty easy. I think that was probably the main thing. And just being encouraging, saying you can do this. And I've got all the tools. Here's the toolbox. Open it and use them. because I've created this whole system and procedures. And the other thing, I asked the why question. Why do you want to do this? Because that exposed with many of the people that were interested in taking over the show, that's where things crumbled. They didn't even know their why. I always tell people, if you're going to do anything in life, you need to ask yourself why. And I always say, go and listen to Simon Sinek. He did a YouTube, a TED talk about why. And he explains the importance of whys. I just did it with a guy yesterday. He contacted me. He has a podcast, but he's kind of new at it. It's not really going anywhere. And he wanted to bend my ear. Again, would have been an 8-hour bend. So I just sent him this question. And I said, you need to define why you're doing this. This will answer all the other questions you can't figure out yet. And you need to write it down. Write it down in detail, your why. From that, you'll be able to define your mantra, your slogan, like the Nike slogan, just do it. Mine, I mentioned, and all the listeners who've listened to Cars Yeah, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, that became my why. I remember when I started this, there weren't many podcasts out there. And I had so many people, why are you doing this? Why don't you go run another company? I'd been running Griot's Garage and had all these employees and all these things. And I said, well, I want to do something for myself, not for somebody else, even though I was part owner at Griot's. And I had a joke. I said, my next job will have no employees and no commuting. So I got that. I operate from my home here. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to deal with anybody. Although I had a lot of employees because all my guests were like employees. So I kind of got that back, but that's okay because when you're done with the podcast, you fire them and they go away. You don't have to talk to them.
It's one way to look at it.
Yeah, kind of the way it is. So I wanted to inspire automotive enthusiasts. And it goes back to the second thing I said is define your avatar. Define very clearly, write it down. I've got a 3-page write-up at the beginning of this journey for me on my avatar. And that is, who is your listener? What is his or her name? Are they married? What age are they? What do they do for a living? But that comes back to, why do they want to listen to you? And in my case, it goes back, my avatar was a guy named Bill. He was a very successful neurosurgeon. He loved cars. It went back to a friend of mine. I'm still friends with him. We raced vintage cars together for a dozen years. We even raced in the same class. We both raced Lotuses and Lolas and had a lot of fun. But in Bill's case, he would come over every Thursday night when I was at Griot's to boys' night out. And I would invite a bunch of friends over, have pizzas, and we would work on cars. I had an ulterior motive. I had new products that we were bringing to market, and I would give them to test them. And I'd kind of watch. How did that work? Do you like that? What do you not like about it? They thought they were just having fun with cars. They were all test beds for me. But Bill, one night, he was there with me late. We were the only two people there. And he goes, I want to do what you do. And I said, Bill, you're a freaking neurosurgeon, pediatric neurosurgeon. You operate on babies' brains, on people's spines. I mean, you save people's lives. And in his dry way, he goes, well, most of them. He's a very funny guy, but he's one of the best. He said, no, you're working in the field you love. You love cars, and you come every day and you work around cars. I want to do that. So my goal when I retire is just to play in my garage around cars. It always stuck with me because I had him on this huge platform. This is a guy that saves people. I mean, the brain surgeon jokes, right? The only person smarter than a brain surgeon is a rocket scientist. Now, the brain surgeon might disagree with you there, but you know what I mean. So that defining why and then creating that avatar will get you back to your why. And then from there, you can start to figure out what you're doing. And as far as the rest of podcasting, once you get that figured out, you'll be able to do what you want to do. And in Ginger's case, when we had our many talks, I asked her all these questions. Why? And I was excited, and you just heard her answer in a way that she wants to take this to another level. And that was my dream too, is that this would live on forever. And at some point, Ginger will be doing other things and she can transfer it over to someone else. Maybe it's somebody that is working for her in her business. Maybe it's somebody else who comes along, and then they can make it their own. And by then, who knows? Maybe we'll all be driving flying cars and it'll be fly, yeah. I don't know. So
Mark, earlier you talked about having that plan, that readiness and preparedness. Ginger used an analogy with cooking, and it's been sticking in my mind that you have to have what they call in the cooking world, mise en place, everything in place before you get started, because podcasting is a career. And if you read between the lines of what you were just saying, there was some advice there for the newbies that are getting into this even today, because more and more podcasts are coming online every week at a scary rate. It's one of the biggest booming industries in the modern era, unlike a lot of other things. And so You've given sage advice many, many times over, and a lot of that surrounds perseverance and tenacity, which happen to be my middle names. But that being said, I want to pick your brain on stick-to-itiveness, the long game, because even with you transitioning to Ginger and Cars Yeah living on, it's still one of the longest running podcasts, one of the most episodes in its catalog in the industry as a whole, 2,600 episodes, let's say. How do you keep going? How do you motivate yourself? And how do you give advice to people to say, get past the early milestones and set your sights on 500, 1,000, 2,500 episodes? How do you do that every morning?
Goes back to why. You have to ask yourself every morning that you get up and you go, I don't want to do this today. Well, why did you start it? Did something change in your life? Well, for me, I've been a car guy since I was a little kid. No, it didn't change. Now, maybe it didn't move as fast as I'd liked, or maybe it didn't generate as much income as I dreamed of, or whatever those types of things would be. But if you go back to the why am I doing this? Now, your why can change, certainly. The way you do it can change. The great thing about this, there's so many supportive roles now that didn't exist when I started. Try to find somebody to edit a show when I started. Nobody did edit a pod. What? Now, there were some people, but not really. But now there's this giant infrastructure around podcasting, businesses that support podcasting in all these different ways that I could have only dreamed of. Like, I wish I could have found a person to do that, but I had to figure it out myself. But for me, it was important to know how to do everything because there wasn't that support, like my website. Now, I've worked in design and advertising forever, so I can design anything you want. But when I had to create a website, when it went goofy, something went wrong, it needs to be changed. I'm still very proud of what it looks like, but it's the old WordPress structure. I always say, these people that do programming or coding, I should say, they're a different breed, because to me, it was like having to build a carburetor on my kitchen counter and then going out to the garage to see if the carburetor worked. I came from a design world where now you use Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, all these things that are just do magic. And now AI. There's a podcast group that I'm still kind of a part of. I don't do a lot with them anymore. 2 years ago, created a podcast out of AI with two people editing a chapter in his book. And he played it for us. It was 12 minutes long. And he said, there were no people. They didn't read the book because there was no people. I just put my book online and went and, now you've got Grok, what it's doing. If you played with that, oh my gosh, it's like having a conversation with somebody. It's magical what you can do now. So I just sit there and I go, wow, if I'd had that tool, if I'd had this tool. So Ginger's going into this with the toolbox analogy, an entire different set of toolboxes and tools that I could have only dreamed about. And it's quite wonderful. So again, there's more competition. Yes. Again, back when I started, I can't tell you how many times I would reach out to somebody and say, would you be on my podcast? And they'd say, what is a podcast? And a lot of them would say, I have no interest in that. Nobody must be listening because what is it? I don't know what it is. And then I would do some keynote talks. I remember one I did with a company that built high performance parts. I went back to Alabama, got it in front of 300 people. And I said, how many people in this room listen to a podcast? 2 hands went up. And there was literally, I think there were 320 people in the room. And I went, okay, how many people know that on this device you're holding in your hand, there is a button you can push and you can become a Cars Yeah listener? And that evening I picked up 280 subscribers. I just showed them by pushing 3 buttons. Now you're a subscriber. My show every day will come to your phone and you can listen. So that was a key thing for me going, okay, I got to figure out how to tell everybody how to do this. But I was still new to social media. So again, you have to go back to your why to answer your original question. Why stick with this? You have to go back to your why. You just got to get up every day and do it. That's what every good person does. And if you're lazy, this is the wrong sport for you. The treadmill never stops. It never stops. The longest vacation I took during this was I went to India for 18 days when my son got married. And the work I had to do to plan for that trip, to have all those shows lined up for I did it for a whole month. And then, of course, when you're in India, they have the internet there. Yeah, they're techie, right? But I still had to go and I remember one show didn't load for some reason, so I'm midnight India trying to make, you just learn, you just do it. Try not to take it all so seriously, which I don't listen to myself when I say that.
So, Mark, you used the phrase, the original question. I've been thinking about that. And for old time's sake, Let's throw in some classic Cars Yeah questions for you and Ginger to answer.
Okay.
If you're a fan of the original Cars Yeah, you kind of know how the format goes, so I decided to pick one for each of you.
All right.
So, Mark, since you got some extra time on your hands these days, please share a great book or two that you've read and you believe others would learn from.
Thank you. That's a great question, Eric. I will remind everybody listening that there is and I hope, I haven't even asked Ginger this, she's going to keep this on the website, guest recommended books. Thank goodness she's nodding her head because it's a huge endeavor, but there are over 3,000 books listed there on the website because I asked all the guests that question because I think learning is important. You have to learn all the time and reading is a good way to do that. So that's one way I'm going to answer your question is go to the Cars Yeah website, click on the resources tab and go to guest recommended books. And there's over 3,000 books there with a quick, easy click to buy. Most of them are car, but some are business related. The other two books that I will recommend are by a good friend of mine, Chris Peniotu. He is a financial advisor and really sharp young man. The first one is Capitalize Your Sales. I wish I'd had this book when I was doing my podcast because my weak link was trying to get sponsors and being good at that. Ginger's going to be an all-star at that, so I don't worry about her there. But this book is all about learning how to do sales. It's a very quick read, 172 pages, so you can read it in an evening or two. The other one he wrote is Capitalize Your Finances, again by Christopher Paniotu, Panagiotu. Try to spell that and say it. Doesn't work. But he's a great guy. And I wish I'd had that book when I was younger because I'd have a lot more money invested and saved up right now instead of spending it on race cars and sports cars and other cars and more cars and more cars. But those two books I would suggest, they're great for younger people trying to get a grasp on their finances and also who need to be in sales. And let's face it, no matter what you do, you're always trying to sell. You're trying to sell yourself to your boss, to your clients, your products, and everything. It's a world that Ginger lives in. So those are my recommendations right now. But I will say I'm in the process of categorizing my car library. I counted over 900 books back there. Well, this is one of the advantages of having so many authors on the show. And Ginger and I've had a few authors together, and she'll have more, I'm sure. They send you books. So I have a car library that I always say when I'm too old to get up and get out of my easy chair, I will be able to read books until they just find me in there with books piled on top of me and I'm dead. It's pretty cool. But I'm trying to categorize them all so that someday, and my son is an avid reader, he will know what's there and he can either hand them off to a library somewhere or add them to his big library. There you go. That's my answer.
All right, Ginger, your classic Cars Yeah question. Tell us about a really special car, bike, or truck in your life. Share a great memory or experience you had with that vehicle.
Well, I'd have to say it was my father's 1957 Chevy. It was blue and silver metallic. My dad raced local stock cars. When he wasn't racing stock cars, he moved over to racing local NHRA events. And if you've ever watched the movie Heart Like a Wheel about Shirley Muldowney, in the very beginning scene of that movie, she's sitting on his lap when she's little, driving the car, and they're going really fast and hilltopping a little bit. Well, I did that with my dad in that car. That car's the car he took me into my very, very first race when I was about 6 or 7 years old. The first racer I ever got to meet was Shirley Muldowney. And listening to and watching her and seeing the cars and listening to the cars and meeting Big Daddy Don Garlitz and Connie Coletta and all those. But it was the sound, the smell, the energy, all that. But watching Shirley. But I didn't have really very much times with my father. He was pretty absent most of my life. And I think that's part of why racing was always so important to me, was that was the one connection that I had with my dad, was racing. And the one connection that we had, the only connection that we had, was that car. And that was really, really special for me. And when I decided later in life to go into racing, going through a very, very difficult time in my life, personally and medically, I was going through a very life-threatening situation right after a very difficult divorce. And I was in the hospital and I woke up from surgery. And I decided right then that I wanted to feel exactly the same way I did when I was at a racetrack. And while I was in the hospital, I actually wrote a poem of why I love racing. And I'll share it with you if you don't mind, but it has to do with this car. And it says, I wrote this little piece a few years ago about my love for racing. The words seem more appropriate now, about just restoring the rumble of life. And it's called When the Smoke Clears. And it says, the heart begins to beat from the roar of the rumble. As you feel the earth shake, the walls start to crumble. When you smell the sweet air, it ignites the fire to desperately fuel that winning desire. As the winds blow by, drafting its way, any darkness subsides to the light of day. When the smoke clears from the victory circle, your passion in life is renewed for your miracle. And I decided that day I was going to go and get a career in racing no matter what.
So will Shirley be on Cars Yeah?
I hope to have Shirley on. I really do. I got to meet her again a few years ago at Bristol, and she hasn't changed a bit, but I hope so. And I plan on it, and I hope so, and I hope she can do it soon.
That'd be great.
But that's my special car.
What's next for Mark? Are you officially retired? Is there more to come? What's going on in Markland?
Well, yes. Right now, Jill and I are in our 4th month of a major remodel here at the house, and that is eating up all my time. We went through this 19 years ago in a much bigger way, and I was run off every morning to work all day and leave Jill with the kids in a house full of contractors and chaos. And I think to this day she has PTSD every time a power tool starts up from that experience. But now I'm here to help. And I'm glad I am, because there are a lot of very minute details. And I grew up with a father who was an architect and a contractor. So I've got a bit of that in me. So we're almost done. I think we're 1 month away. Other than that, we've been traveling a little bit. We have our 3rd grandchild now. So we head off to Arizona about every 2 months to see them and see my daughter and her husband. My son and his wife travel a lot. So they drop off their child, which is a dog. We've never had a dog, so it's like having a toddler in the house. This morning was especially challenging. It was like, leave me alone. The dog would not leave me alone. But he's gotten us out for some very long walks. And my wife does like 6 miles a day. So we go out on these long walks with the dog, which is good. We're having a beautiful week here. I have some trips planned coming up very soon. I'm going to the La Jolla Concours, which is my hometown. Ginger's had 3 people from La Jolla Concours on the show recently to talk about that event. I've attended lots of concours, been to 32 Pebble Beach Car Weeks and historic races, and pretty much, I don't know, not all the concours, because there's as many concours as our podcast, it seems, these days. But I'll be going to that, and I'm going to Patrick Long, who's known for endurance racing with Porsche, his air water event, which is part of his Luftgekühlt events. And that happens to be the same weekend. So I'm going to go down and see my mom while I'm down there. My sister took off for Paris, so I'll be staying at her house. I will get to see her, but I'll see my mom, which is good because she's going through some challenges health-wise right now. But I'm going to sneak away for 2 days with an old college surf buddy, Steve Bernstein. He's going to come and be the official Cars Yeah photographer. He does that for us. We'll do that for Ginger, hopefully in the future, going to racing events and takes pictures and kind of things. So I'm going to meet up with him, and he's going to go to both those events with me and take pictures that we can hand off to Ginger for social media and things like that. Yeah, but other than that, I don't have right now any big thing, as you say, planned. I have some ideas in my head, but every time I start to think, do you really want to start that at this point in time?
You got to find the why, Mark.
I find the why.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. I've worked since I was about 12 years old. And so right now it's a very weird time for me, because to get up in the morning and go, oh, I don't have to do anything, it's kind of cool, is unique for me. Trying to focus more on my health. So more exercise, need to lose some weight, same old, same old. So try to get myself in better shape, because as you age, that's very important, obviously. But other than that, we'll see. I'm playing around with some ideas for some things, but I think one thing I'd like to do is get back into photography. I was very into photography for a long time, and then I kind of steered away from it, other than just the iPhone thing, sold all my Nikon equipment, thinking about getting all new equipment with the digital Sony cameras. I've been talking to friends of mine who do that for fun. Talking to my friend Steve. I don't think he's a Nikon guy or a Sony guy. I think he's a Canon guy. But at any rate, yeah, there'll be some fun things to come, and trying to help people out a little bit. As my wife says, I need to learn to say no, and I'm learning that from Ginger, her no rule. There's some things you need to say no to. Otherwise, you can end up helping people all day, which is fine. But at some point, you need to know when to stop that and go do something for yourself. So yeah, but right now I'm just kind of enjoying this bit of freedom. And my goal this year is helping Ginger be successful. So helping her edit shows, answering questions she has going along, and nudging her. I feel like I need to give her a little nudge once in a while over certain things. So yeah.
Pointing the divining rods at you, Ginger. What's the next thing we're working on you? Any spoilers? Any special guests? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
How about this big deal?
I was going to say, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, you hit it head on. I didn't want to hit head on. I was trying to be subtle about it,
Yes, there was an announcement that was released nationally that I had put together a very large deal, especially in the dirt world of dirt racing, between Hulk Hogan and his company, Real American Beer, and the World Racing Group, and the 5 dirt series under that umbrella. And when you talk about World Racing Group and the world of outlaws, especially the world of outlaws late models, you're talking about, people aren't familiar with this, basically the NASCAR of dirt. There hadn't been a deal like this in a very, very long time in the dirt world. And I was very excited that a gentleman by the name of James Case, who's the senior VP of partnerships for Real American Beer, called me one day and said, "Hey, we are going into motorsports. We want to go into motorsports, and we want you to lead us to it. And we want you to take us where we need to be." We announced the deal. So there's a lot of things going to be coming out of that. It's growing really, really fast. It's been fun. That this partnership's going to be fun. I get to play Switzerland because I get to work with both sides, right? People always ask me to explain kind of what I do, my job. And I ask them, well, if you've ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, I'm the female version of Jerry Maguire, but in the motorsports world. It's a huge deal. And there's a lot to come from that, and more things that I'm working on, and probably some people on the show in the near future from that partnership. We'll just say that.
I knew it. She's going to have Hulk Hogan on the show. I called it. There it is. Brother.
I'm pleading the fifth.
Ripping his shirt open,
So, but no, I'm very grateful to Hulk and his crew, and James and Conrad and Terry, all of them that are leading this charge with that. And then also really proud of doing this deal with the World Racing Group and in their group of guys and gals. It's going to be fun. And there's more to come, and a lot of other series that I'm working on right now, but that's to remain.
I got to meet Hulk at SEMA just by chance. I walked around a car and he was standing there. We both turned right in each other's faces, and Hulk Hogan, and he got a big smile. Everybody was trying to talk to him, and just, he was the nicest person, took time, listened, unlike some stars you meet and you can get out of my face. He was super great guy. So yeah, this is a big deal. Congratulations, Ginger. This is awesome. And this will have some great ramifications for Cars Yeah, and using that Cars Yeah platform to carry things forward. So really proud of you.
Thank you. Yes, it was a multi-year deal. And yes, and Cars Yeah was very much part of this conversation for something in the future.
Well, folks, we've reached that part of the episode where I like to invite our guests to share any shout-outs, promotions, thank yous, or anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered thus far. So we'll start with Ginger.
I'm in victory lane, and I need to do
You need to drink the milk and say something.
the Burger King, and thank you, Real American Beer, thank you, World Racing Group, thank you, Mark Greene. Thank you guys for having me on this show. I especially want to thank Mark for believing in me and giving me this opportunity to share my voice and share my passion, but most of all, entrusting me with his legacy. And I couldn't be more grateful and humble about the opportunity. And thank you guys for having me on here today. It was wonderful to meet you guys and talk. And I'm sure we'll be talking more in the near future.
Well, Mark, you get the last word.
As always, I encourage everyone to listen to Cars Yeah, Ginger's weekly show. And she said to me one time she might bring back more shows and get to the crazy world that I had. That would be awesome. I know she can handle that. I'm excited by the new guests that she's bringing, the new voice, the new thought process, which is exciting for me because, as I said, I want this to live on. Having handed what I say the keys over to Ginger, I wish her the best success and encourage her to have fun with this show and keep bringing all those wonderful people forward. And of course, if you want to listen to Cars Yeah, you can find it on any mobile podcast app. New website will be coming. I'm excited to see that. Should be very, very cool. And of course, the social media sites, Cars Yeah is kind of everywhere, YouTube and Instagram. And I think the only place I never put it on was TikTok. Just couldn't get into the TikTok thing. But
We'll see if that still exists soon. Yeah.
maybe Ginger will enlighten me. And if any of you want to keep up with me, I just started my own Instagram. I think I have 16 followers. So woohoo! I'm backing away from social media a bit because I spent so much time on it and trying to spend more time on reading and learning. And with my wife, Jill, we've been married, as I mentioned, for 40 years. So she's carried me and promoted me. And the times I was going to give up on this, she just said, you got to keep going. Why'd you start it? Why'd you start it? And spending more time with my kids, being a grandparent is just insanely cool. Still can't think of myself as a grandpa. I think that's for old people. But I guess I am. So 3 little ones is awesome. Hopefully there'll be more in the future. So yeah, but you can find me there. And I have my own Facebook page too. So you can find me there. happy to accept anybody that wants to hang out with me. And I'm trying to promote Cars Yeah as much as I can, but I'm trying to take some steps back away from it too.
As we wrap up this special crossover episode with Cars Yeah, it's clear that while one chapter is closing, an exciting new journey is just beginning. Mark, your passion and dedication have shaped Cars Yeah into a go-to destination for automotive inspiration, and your legacy will undoubtedly continue and resonate with listeners. Ginger, as you take the wheel, we can't wait to see where you steer Cars Yeah next, bringing fresh perspectives while honoring the spirit that has made the show so beloved.
And with that, I can't thank you both enough for coming on the show. And Mark, I have to say, you talked about tenacity, perseverance, the why, inspiration is at the core of Cars Yeah. And I've been thinking about it this whole time that you guys have been talking. Like you say, you never know what's going to come out at the end in the story. And I thought to myself, there was a moment, even in my motorsports career and getting into podcasting, that I said, one day I'm going to be on Cars Yeah. It was a goal. And to use a phrase that the young kids use now, I visioned it. I put it out there, it manifested itself, and I ended up on Cars Yeah. And so it's been an incredible ride. It's been an absolute honor to call you a friend and a mentor and to be involved in the Cars Yeah universe. I want to thank you for joining us on this crossover episode, and we really do look forward to what comes next. We're staying tuned for those new stories, the new voices, and of course, the most incredible automotive journeys and passions that are out there. So in my best impression of Mark, here goes. Until next time, keep the engines revving and the inspiration rolling.
And we'll see you down the road.
We hope you enjoyed another awesome episode of Break Fix Podcast, brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Grand Touring Motorsports. And if you'd like to learn more about the content of this episode, be sure to check out the follow-on article at gtmotorsports.org. We remain a commercial-free and no annual fees organization through our sponsors, but also through the generous support of our fans, families, and friends through Patreon. For as little as $2.50 a month, you can get access to more behind-the-scenes action, additional pit stop minisodes, and other VIP goodies, as well as keeping our team of creators fed on their strict diet of Fig Newtons, gummy bears, and Monster. So consider signing up for Patreon today at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. And remember, without you, none of this would be possible.